Monster Hunter Stories 3 is, as of making of this video, right around the corner, so there's no better moment to review Monster Hunter Stories 2, right? A game that I actually have been holding off to play quite a bit. Main reason is probably the fact that while I enjoyed my time with it and I found certain aspects to be very interesting, there were some small problems here and there that did pile up during my playthrough. To the point that if I were to get into the sequel right afterwards, it would ruin the fun. So I just decided to wait, sort of cool down from it before I review the next game. And now that I have, I was actually very excited again to get back into it. The idea behind it is still great in my opinion. Yes, it has Pokemon ideas, but it still reminded me in terms of vibe and usage of the creatures themselves, more of Dragon Quest Treasures or even Ni No Kuni to a small degree. And for the first game that divert from the original formula of Monster Hunter, and it being originally a DS game, it laid a pretty incredible foundation to build forward upon, despite its small problems here and there. So let's see what they build on top of it with Monster Hunter Stories 2. Did they expand on it, improve certain aspects, or does it already fall into a pattern of the same thing but a different day? There's only one way to find out. This is my review of Monster Hunter Stories 2. Monster Hunter Stories 2 takes place roughly 5 years after the events of the first game. You play as the granddaughter or son of a legendary writer named Red. He has gone missing after he started to investigate these strange pits opening up across the world that causes wild monsters to completely lose their mind in rage. After a fateful encounter with Anna, who gives you a special monster egg, it falls onto you to take care of it and to follow your grandfather's footsteps. Continuing the investigation on these mysterious pits, stop the enraged monsters, and of course find a solution to save the world. Now, it's not a bad story by default per se. Look no further to again the first game for it. There it actually worked pretty fine. Better even if I compare to this one, because there you were a nobody chosen one. Here we are from a legendary bloodline known across the world by almost everyone, and we linger on that fact constantly throughout the entire story. Characters you meet on your journey constantly reference and even full flashback to moments where they met your grandfather, going over and talking about all his great deeds and such, which makes this story at moments not feel like our story, but someone else's lived through us. Though oddly enough, in this same game, it's also able to tell a story while lingering in the past, but in a good way. Even making that part of the story feel like our own story as, well, it was our own story. While there are no direct or active mentions or visuals of your character from the first game, the people you met and helped on that adventure make a full return in this game, which was actually great to see happening. It's a fantastic way to show progression of the world you once had impact on, but it's not on the nose about it. In fact, I would even argue that the events in the previous game is not properly mentioned at all by the characters that lived in it, making me seriously doubt if they retconned the first game's story without me knowing. Though to be fair, I can understand to a degree why they went this route. I can imagine that for many people this will be their first actual Monster Hunter story game. So having it to pan too much on the previous game can be very problematic. And I do appreciate the careful thought of something like that. Yet I find it very unfortunate that they didn't do more with it in this game. If you really must have a protagonist from a legendary bloodline, but you don't want to go into full detail about the past, then you could still have picked a character from the previous game over some random guy. But we can't even take that part out of the argument because the story itself that is present in this game is still not that good. It does its job for sure, but it goes through very predictable paces and situations that are just common in sort of stories like this, making it not that interesting or immersive. The world, on the other hand, is very interesting and immersive, especially by the fact that some places we visit were also in the first game and have considerably changed and progressed as time went on. A personal favorite of mine is that Monster Hunter Story still follows the classic idea of world building. You start off in a grassland, soon after a snowland, and then a volcano one. Yes, it might be a cliche way, but it does do the trick well to set a stage and set character for the place and monsters you will find. The world itself also looks very nice as the art style got improved greatly as well, yet it kept the character from the previous game. It is still very similar, and I've still loved the fact that the color tone that is used is very lively and bright, but here in the second installment it's a little bit more subtle. But despite those good aspects, the feeling of wasted potential truly was felt in my experience with this game. Especially nearing the halfway point of the game, where the story seemingly seems to move barely forward, and where my experience was mostly carried by the previous game. The world itself has a good atmosphere and is interesting, but it stays surface level for most of the time. There are no side stories or content that goes in deeper in what exists around your character. And on top of that, the main story's message is constantly countered by the gameplay itself. The game goes on and on about how important the bond between the rider and monster is, how beautiful these creatures are and need to be treated properly and with respect. Yet, outside of the cutscenes, you do the exact opposite via the combat and management aspect of the game. Which is a little bit annoying, but it's mostly just a fun joke, as the gameplay is this game's strongest and most fun aspect. In Monster Hunter Stories 2, we play as a rider instead of the usual hunter. The big difference between the two is simple. One is a ruthless hunter that hunts down all these monsters simply for loot to create better armor and weapons, all to just do it again. While the rider cares for his monsters, raises it and forms a bond with it only so that they can hunt monsters together for loot to create better armor and weapons to only do it again and again. In all seriousness though, the biggest difference is found in the combat itself. Here it's party turn-based with a main focus on a rock-paper-scissors aspect. This was already present in the first game, and in the second one they developed and gratefully improved it. As you travel through the world or follow the story, you will bump into all sorts of monsters. During this combat encounter, it's key that you observe the monster you're trying to beat, as you want to know its pattern, special attacks, and of course weaknesses. At the same time, you need to consider your own options and the timing to use different monsters in your party, special attacks or skills. Yet all that information is used to actually only answer one simple question. Which one of the 3 types of attacks will I do? These 3 attacks translate to the before mentioned rock, paper, scissors aspect. Each attack is stronger than the other one while at the same time is weak against another. Of course, the aim is at being on the winning side of these head-to-heads, as they call it in the game, at all time, making the right educated guess on what to pick and win the entire battle. I absolutely love this aspect. It was definitely my favorite thing of the first game, and here they perfected the system further. Because as simplistic as it is, it still requires tactic, and it's the simplicity that also makes the combat really clever. It's not hard to master the tactics required to win in this game. Each monster has its attack pattern, and based on its looks alone, you can make an educated guess what most likely will be their go-to attack. Or you just simply can just let a turn or two pass and see what it does. Once you know it and got it memorized, you are already on track to beat each encounter. But you're not there yet, because the game will still punish you if you're not playing by these rules and tactics, and try to just, for example, brute force your way through the encounter constantly. On top of that, the control you have in an encounter is rather small. You can't control your monster and have to depend on it making the right calls. This is why it's important to know which monster from your party to use when and where. If you require speed attacks during an encounter, you better swap to a monster that is more likely to do one than one that keeps spamming strong attacks. With bond points you gain during an encounter, you can force monsters to do certain attacks with a specific type. Yet that can at times feel very counterproductive, because most of these points are gained by winning head-to-heads instead of forcing to win them via skills. Now, if you and your partner pick the right moves, you will even get a better reward than just winning the head-to-head altogether. Instead of dealing higher damage and taking a little bit, you get no damage whatsoever and deal massive damage to the enemy itself. It's the easiest way to get loads of these bond points to eventually do this ultimate attack, which is where this game goes all in on the ridiculousness and shows some of the coolest attack animations I've seen in a long time. But so far we have only talked about the things that are very similar to the previous game. So let's dive into some particular ways they improved on it. The first thing that immediately comes to mind is that besides your partner, you also have a companion that joins you on the adventure. This brought a huge balance into the combat that felt missing in the first game. It was not uncommon that during big encounters with a little bit of bad RNG, I would be wiped out in an instant as the enemy focused too much on the same target in a row. On top of that, it feels like my rider, but also the companion you get, is a lot stronger. It felt like I could take a hit or two instead of dying the moment a monster sneezed on me. With these companions also came these co-op ultimate attacks, which deal massive amount of damage and dialing a cool aspect even further up to 11. And just like with your own partner, you can't control your companion or their monsters, so when making choices you have a little bit more information to consider, but also more viable options. What if your monster is not doing the right type of attack but you don't want to swap him out? Well, you don't have to if the other monster on the field does the right attack, because then you will partner up with that monster in the upcoming head-to-head. And when it comes to playing the support class, your companions are amazing as they constantly do buffs and heal you in time, allowing you to focus more on dealing more damage. It's a flow of combat that you grow into, and as you learn more and memorize more and more about these monsters you face, the more satisfying encounters become as your plans constantly fall in place, giving no monster a chance to lay a finger on you while you completely floor it with perfect combo duos and head-to-heads. Yet, there's a huge however to this combat system. The balance of this rock-paper-scissors combat system is very, and I do mean very fine. It works very well at its core, but can and unfortunately will be brought out of balance at times. As mentioned before, if you play good, you don't have a lot to fear of the monsters. You and your party rarely gets a lot of damage and wins battles at rapid speed. Even many of the story bosses work like this. As long as you pay attention and do the right things, all is good and the satisfaction of following those tactics is high. But near the end of the game, there are monsters thrown your way that, while can be blocked by head-to-head counters, randomly do a second attack or even a third one. This attack cannot be blocked and therefore deals a large amount of damage you can't stop or do anything about. This takes the fun out of the game rather quickly. Yes, it adds difficulty, but it feels so tacked on, artificial and out of your hands to deal with. To stop these double attacks from happening, you sometimes have to break certain body parts of the opponent. But depending on the boss design, it may take a while to do so, and some don't even have a way out of it all. It's a similar problem that I had with the previous game, and while here we have a companion to soften up the blow, it can still wipe you off the board with a little bit of RNG. And I don't understand why it has to be this way. What's wrong that if you're good at the tactics the game demands of you, that the difficulty is low? Isn't that how tactical games should work? Another way that the fun of the combat is ruined is how you have to treat the monsters themselves and make a party with them. The story in both games revolves around the bond between a rider and his or her monsters. Unlike the hunters, you care for them and want to connect with them, yet as mentioned before, you hunt them just as much for resources and their eggs, like sport. But what is worse is when you finally have a bond with a certain monster in your party, you have to give that up almost purely because you reached a moment that the enemy outmatches you with their stats. And to match them again, you have to get monsters with higher and better stats. Yet those stats are connected not to levels, but the rarity of the monster itself and the genes you have them equipped. Even though it's a little bit a joke that the story is very hypocritical in the sense of how to treat your monsters and how in reality you're treating them, but I really dislike the feeling that I had to drop a monster from my party because its stats were just too low. You can't outpace the stats curve by just putting your head down and focus on leveling, nor is the gene system of using surplus monsters you find to improve the monsters you already have enough to make a difference. It's a good idea that you can use monsters you find while searching for new ones can be used to improve other monsters that you have, yet you can only copy one gene over at a time to another monster. And there are so many of them that stacking and upgrading them takes a considerable amount of time, yet feels too RNG for actual progress. So in the end, there will be a moment where you feel like you're at an impasse of progression, which in my playthrough creeped in near the end of it, and was the moment it seemed like I was asked to abandon what I built up just for progression. Which I didn't, I powered through, which had its struggles, but overall it just sucks and really is something I just didn't felt like doing. Ultimately, this closed off my experience with Monster Hunter Stories 2 with a bit of a bummer. It started off really high and ends a lot lower than I would have liked, considering how much fun I find in the combat system and the tone and atmosphere of the game. Don't get me wrong, it's not at a point I would say it ends on a bad note, but I wouldn't blame someone if they drop the game at a moment combat starts to get out of balance. Because that is the aspect you will like and is the reason you want to play this game. Because the story ain't going to do it for you, and the atmosphere and tone you find around in the game is good, but not that good. I highly recommend those who are looking for a monster collecting game to check Monster Hunter Stories 2 out. The combat is the highlight and a lot of fun, but just be ready that in the end it loses its balance a little bit. But outside of that, it's really good, and I wish/hope in the next installment they found a better way to up the difficulty, or at least stop with implementing a cheap artificial form of difficulty. Time will tell, but I am definitely hoping for more in the future. If not for the combat, then at least for the story.